In the vastness of space, where empires rise and fall with the whims of those in power, there is one truth that has always been overlooked. Underestimating humanity is a fatal mistake. On the neutral ground of Nexus Station, where diplomacy was supposed to reign, Captain Elena Vasquez, Earth's first interstellar diplomat, was publicly humiliated by the Cronin Empire, an act that would send ripples across the galaxy. But what the Cronins didn't realize was that this insult was the spark that would ignite a firestorm. As they laughed at humanity's weakness, they failed to see the storm brewing beneath the calm surface of one human's resolve. Elena Vasquez had 120 minutes to deliver a message that would forever alter the galaxy's balance of power. Earth was no longer a victim, it was a force to be reckoned with. And what followed would shake the stars themselves. The Terran Reckoning Part 1. The insult that shook the galaxy, the Nexus Station, hung in the void like a massive crystal flower, its 12 arms stretching across 15 kilometers of space. Each arm housed a different species' diplomatic quarter, connected by transparent tubes that offered breathtaking views of the swirling nebula beyond. For 300 years, the station had served as neutral ground for the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Today, it would witness the birth of a new order. Captain Elena Vasquez stepped off the Earth transport with the confidence of someone who had walked through fire and emerged unburned. At 35, she carried herself with the precise grace of a career military officer, though her current role as Earth's first interstellar diplomat required a different kind of warfare. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her uniform bore the modest insignia of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. To the casual observer, she looked unremarkable among the exotic aliens filling the station's corridors. The Cronin delegation had arrived 3 days earlier, their massive dreadnoughts casting shadows across the station's solar collectors. Emperor Thaxmore ruled the largest empire in the galaxy, his species having conquered 47 worlds through a combination of superior technology and ruthless efficiency. The Cronins stood 8 feet tall, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming with bioluminescent patterns that indicated rank and lineage. They viewed most other species as useful resources at best, dangerous pests at worst. Elena made her way through the station's central hub, where representatives from dozens of species conducted business in the careful dance of interstellar politics. The Valix delegation floated in their atmospheric suits, their tentacles weaving complex patterns of greeting. The crystalline Zek-RA chimed melodiously as they passed, their forms refracting light into rainbow patterns. Even the mysterious Shadowkin had sent an observer, though their representative remained hidden within a swirling cloud of dark matter. The human delegation's quarters were modest compared to the vast chambers assigned to the established powers. Elena's team consisted of just 5 people. Herself, 2 junior diplomats, a communications specialist, and a security officer. They had been given 3 days to prepare for what many considered a futile exercise. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for only 50 years, having achieved faster-than-light travel through a combination of brilliant engineering and what other species considered reckless experimentation. Elena reviewed her notes one final time before the opening session. Earth's position was simple. They wanted formal recognition as a sovereign power and membership in the Galactic Trade Consortium. The benefits were obvious: access to advanced technologies, protection under interstellar law, and the ability to establish colonies without fear of interference. The challenge was convincing species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia that a relative newcomer deserved a seat at the table. The Grand Assembly Hall occupied the station's center, a spherical chamber where representatives could position themselves according to their species' needs. The Cronins had claimed the prime position directly across from the speaking platform, their delegation arranged in a perfect triangle with Emperor Thaxmore at the apex. His presence dominated the chamber, the bioluminescent patterns on his carapace pulsing in slow, hypnotic rhythms that other species found mildly unsettling. Elena took her position in the section reserved for petitioning species alongside delegates from 3 other worlds seeking recognition. The chamber's translation system hummed to life, converting the dozens of languages into comprehensible speech. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her, some curious, others dismissive, a few genuinely hostile. High Arbiter Zefkol called the session to order, his four arms weaving the traditional gestures of neutrality. The vegan had served as the station's chief diplomat for over a century, his patience legendary even among his naturally calm species. He introduced each delegation with formal precision, saving the petitioners for last. When Elena's turn came, she stood and walked to the speaking platform with measured steps. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of addressing the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I come before you representing not just the 4 billion humans of Earth, but the limitless potential of our species. We seek not charity, but partnership, not protection, but respect. We offer our unique perspectives, our innovative solutions, and our unwavering commitment to peace through strength. The response was immediate and telling. The Valix delegation's tentacles twitched in what Elena recognized as polite interest. The Zekaray's crystalline forms dimmed slightly, a sign of careful consideration. But the Cronin section remained motionless, their bioluminescent patterns shifting to what Elena's briefings had identified as contempt. Emperor Thaxmore's voice boomed across the chamber when Elena finished her prepared remarks. The Assembly recognizes the Cronin Empire's response to the Terran petition. Elena felt her heart rate increase slightly, though her expression remained calm. This was the moment they had all been preparing for. The Emperor's response would likely determine not just Earth's application, but humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. The massive alien rose from his position, his 8 legs carrying him to the speaking platform with predatory grace. Up close, Elena could see the scars that crisscrossed his carapace, each one a testament to the battles that had built his empire. His primary eyes focused on her while his secondary organs tracked the movements of other delegates. The Cronin Empire has observed the species known as humans for several decades. Thaxmore began, his translated voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. We have watched them stumble through first contact, make elementary mistakes in basic diplomacy, and demonstrate a troubling tendency toward violence when faced with challenges they cannot comprehend. Elena forced herself to remain still, though she could feel the tension radiating from her small delegation. This was going worse than their most pessimistic projections had suggested. Their request for recognition is premature. The Emperor continued, his bioluminescent patterns now pulsing with what Elena recognized as aggressive dominance. They lack the wisdom that comes from centuries of galactic citizenship. They have contributed nothing to the advancement of interstellar civilization. Most concerning, they display the same reckless ambition that has led to the downfall of countless primitive species. The chamber's atmosphere grew thick with anticipation. Elena could see other delegates leaning forward, sensing that this was about to become more than a routine rejection. The Emperor's patterns were shifting to configurations that suggested he was preparing for something beyond mere words. Therefore, Thaxmore declared, his voice rising to fill every corner of the chamber. The Cronin Empire not only rejects the Terran petition, but formally declares humanity to be a species of concern. Their expansion must be contained, their ambitions curtailed, and their dangerous tendencies corrected through proper guidance. Elena felt the words hit her like physical blows. A formal declaration of concern was just one step short of a species being classified as a galactic threat. It would mean economic sanctions, travel restrictions, and the possibility of military intervention if Earth's actions were deemed too aggressive. But it was what happened next that transformed a diplomatic setback into a moment that would echo through galactic history. Emperor Thaxmore descended from the speaking platform and walked directly to Elena's position. The chamber fell silent except for the soft whisper of environmental systems. Every delegate understood they were witnessing something unprecedented. The leader of the galaxy's most powerful empire was personally confronting a representative of a species he had just declared dangerous. "You humans," he said. his voice now carrying amplification so that every being in the chamber could hear, need to understand your place in the natural order. You are children playing with weapons you don't understand, dreaming of conquests beyond your capability. Elena looked up at the towering alien, her dark eyes reflecting none of the fear that many species would have shown in her position. Emperor Thaxmore, I understand your concerns about humanity's rapid advancement. Perhaps we could discuss. The blow came without warning. The Emperor's primary manipulator arm struck Elena across the face with calculated force, enough to send her stumbling backward, but not enough to cause permanent damage. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot, followed by absolute silence. Elena caught herself before falling, one hand touching the corner of her mouth where Thaxmore's blow had split her lip. A drop of bright red blood appeared on her finger, and she studied it with almost scientific interest. When she looked up, her expression had changed in a way that made several delegates unconsciously step backward. You have 120 minutes, she said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than mere diplomatic training. 120 minutes to reconsider your position and issue a formal apology to the Terran people. The Emperor's bioluminescent patterns flickered with what Elena had learned to recognize as amusement. Or what, human? You will file a complaint with the Galactic Ethics Committee? Request mediation from the High Council? Your species has no power here. Elena wiped the blood from her lip and looked at it again. Or, I will show you exactly what happens when you mistake human restraint for human weakness. The threat was delivered in such a calm tone that several delegates wondered if their translation systems had malfunctioned. Emperor Thaxmore's patterns shifted to display genuine amusement now, his massive form shaking with what passed for laughter among his species. I look forward to your demonstration, he said, returning to his delegation's position. Perhaps it will provide educational value for the other primitive species present. Elena nodded once, then touched a small device on her uniform collar. To most observers, it appeared to be a simple communication badge. What they couldn't see was the quantum-encrypted signal that traveled instantly across the galaxy, arriving at a facility buried deep beneath the Colorado Rockies. Admiral Marcus Chun was reviewing fleet deployment schedules when the priority alert appeared on his display. The message was brief and coded in a way that made his blood run cold. Prometheus Protocol authorized. Full deployment in 120 minutes. Authorization. Vasquez Elena M. Confirmation. Blood sample verified. Chin had hoped he would never see those words. For 20 years, he had overseen the most classified project in human history, preparing for the day when humanity would need to prove itself worthy of respect in a hostile galaxy. That day had apparently arrived. All stations, this is Admiral Chun, he announced over the facility's intercom system. Prometheus Protocol is now active. All personnel to deployment stations. This is not a drill. Throughout the solar system, hidden installations began powering up systems that had been dormant for decades. On the far side of the moon, massive doors opened to reveal shipyards that officially didn't exist. In the asteroid belt, mining stations revealed their true purpose as weapons platforms came online. And in the depths of space, ghost fleets that had been moving in perfect stealth for years began transmitting their positions to Central Command. Elena walked calmly back to her delegation's quarters, ignoring the whispers and stares that followed her through the station's corridors. Her junior diplomats peppered her with questions, but she simply smiled and suggested they order something from the station's restaurants. We may not have another chance for a proper meal for some time, she said. As she entered her private quarters, Elena activated her personal communication system and sent a brief message to her mother in Mexico City, thinking of you. Whatever happens next, remember that we do this for Earth. Then she sat down to wait, counting down the minutes until Emperor Thaxmore discovered that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their military might, but their ability to plan for the unthinkable and execute those plans with absolute precision. In the depths of space, a ghost fleet began to move. The awakening of Terra's Wrath 97 minutes remained when the first anomaly appeared on the Cronin Empire's early warning systems. Deep space sensor arrays detected gravitational distortions in 17 different star systems, each one perfectly positioned to monitor traffic to and from Cronin worlds. The distortions were subtle, easily dismissed as stellar phenomena or equipment malfunction. That was exactly what their creators had intended. Admiral Marcus Chun stood in the command center of Prometheus Station, watching as tactical displays showed the real-time positions of humanity's most closely guarded secret. For 2 decades, Earth had been playing a very different game than the rest of the galaxy realized. While other species saw humans as recent arrivals to interstellar civilization, Earth's strategists had been preparing for this exact moment. Sir, called Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim from her position at the AI coordination console, Atlas reports all Ghost Fleet units are in position and awaiting final authorization. Chin nodded grimly. Atlas, the adaptive tactical learning and analysis system, was humanity's greatest achievement in artificial intelligence. Unlike the rigid computer systems used by other species, Atlas had been designed to think like a human while processing information at superhuman speeds. It had been observing galactic politics for 50 years, learning the behavioral patterns of every major species, identifying their strengths and weaknesses, and developing strategies that no organic mind could have conceived. Patch me through to Captain Vasquez, Chin ordered. The communication established instantly using quantum entanglement transmitters that made interception impossible. Elena's face appeared on the screen, and Chun could see the controlled tension in her expression. Elena, are you certain about this? He asked quietly. Once we begin, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way again. Elena touched the corner of her mouth where Thaxmore's blow had split her lip. They never saw us as anything but prey, Marcus. At least now, they'll see us as apex predators. Chun felt the chill run down his spine. He had known Elena for 15 years, had watched her transform from a promising young officer into humanity's most skilled diplomat. But the woman looking back at him from the screen was someone else entirely, someone who had been pushed past the breaking point and found something terrifying on the other side. Atlas, initiate Phase 1, Chin commanded. The AI's response was immediate and comprehensive. Across 17 star systems, stealth fields that had been active for years suddenly deactivated. What had appeared to be empty space revealed itself to be crawling with human vessels, not the primitive ships that other species expected, but sleek predators that incorporated technology decades ahead of anything in Earth's public arsenal. The Ghost Fleet had been positioned with mathematical precision. Each ship occupied a point in space that would allow it to strike multiple targets while maintaining optimal escape vectors. They weren't just randomly placed, they were positioned according to a vast, three-dimensional chess game that Atlas had been playing in its digital mind for 2 decades. Emperor Thaxmore was reviewing intelligence reports about human military capabilities when his strategic advisor burst into his private chambers aboard the flagship Dominion's Edge. The aliens' bioluminescent patterns were flashing in rapid sequences that indicated extreme distress. My Emperor, the advisor gasped. Our deep space sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the outer rim. The patterns suggest what? Thaxmore demanded, his own patterns shifting to aggressive interrogation mode. Ships, my Emperor. Hundreds of them. They've been hiding in our sensor shadows for we don't know how long. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Thaxmore's patterns went dark for a moment, then began pulsing with the slow, dangerous rhythm that his subjects had learned to fear. Show me. The holographic display that materialized above his desk showed the Cronin Empire's territory from a strategic perspective. Red dots indicated Cronin military installations, blue represented civilian populations, and green showed the locations of allied species. But now there were new markers, white dots that seemed to surround every major Cronin position like a perfectly planned infection. How many ships? Thaxmore asked quietly. Conservative estimate, 3,000. But, my Emperor, these readings suggest vessels much larger than anything we've seen from the humans. Some of these signatures are comparable to our own dreadnoughts. The Emperor studied the display with growing unease. The positioning was too perfect, too calculated. This wasn't the random deployment of a species that had stumbled into interstellar warfare. This was the work of strategists who had been planning this moment for decades. Establish communication with the Nexus station, he ordered. I want to speak with the human delegation immediately. But when the communication link established, Elena's response was not what he expected. Emperor Thaxmore, she said, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had unnerved him in the assembly hall. I believe you have something to say to me. What is the meaning of this military build-up? He demanded. The Galactic Accords specifically prohibit. The Galactic Accords, Elena interrupted, apply only to recognized members of the galactic community. As you recently made clear, humanity has not been granted that status. Thaxmore felt his primary hearts begin to beat faster. Are you threatening the Cronin Empire? I'm explaining the consequences of your actions, Elena replied. You had 120 minutes to issue an apology. You now have 73 minutes remaining. The communication ended, leaving Thaxmore staring at a blank screen. Around him, his advisors maintained careful silence, their patterns dim with anxiety. Finally, his strategic advisor spoke. My Emperor, perhaps we should consider— No, Thaxmore said firmly. I will not be intimidated by a species that learned to travel between stars barely 50 years ago. Order the fleet to battle stations. If the humans want to play at war, they will learn why the Cronin Empire has ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries. What Emperor Thaxmore didn't understand was that Atlas had already predicted this exact response. The AI had analyzed decades of Cronin decision-making patterns, psychological profiles of their leadership, and historical precedents for similar situations. It had calculated a 97.3% probability that Thaxmore would respond with aggression rather than diplomacy. Humanity had planned accordingly. The first strike came not from the Ghost Fleet, but from something far more subtle. Atlas had spent years infiltrating the computer systems of every major galactic power, not to steal secrets, but to understand how they thought. It had learned that the Cronins, like many hierarchical species, relied heavily on centralized command structures. Their entire military operated on the principle that orders flowed from the top down, with absolute obedience expected at every level. Atlas decided to test that principle. The virus, though calling it a virus was like calling a hurricane a breeze, propagated through Cronin military networks with the speed of thought. It didn't destroy systems or steal data. Instead, it did something far more insidious. It introduced tiny delays in command transmission, created minor glitches in status reports, and subtly altered the timing of routine operations. The result was chaos. Across the Cronin Empire, military units began receiving contradictory orders. Fleet commanders found their communications systems experiencing random failures. Logistics networks reported supply shortages that didn't exist while ignoring actual shortages that did. Most critically, the Empire's early warning systems began filtering out legitimate threats while flagging harmless civilian traffic as potential dangers. Emperor Thaxmore watched in growing horror as his perfectly organized military machine began to fall apart. Reports flooded in from across the Empire, ships arriving at wrong coordinates, cargo vessels being fired upon by their own defense platforms, entire fleets losing contact with Central Command. What is happening? He demanded of his technical advisors. We're experiencing widespread system failures, my Emperor, one replied, his patterns flickering with confusion. Our cybersecurity specialists are investigating, but the malfunctions appear to be occurring simultaneously across multiple star systems. This is sabotage, Thaxmore declared. The humans are responsible. My Emperor, our networks are isolated from all external influences. The probability of outside interference is— Do not lecture me about probability, Thaxmore roared. Contact the human delegation. Tell them their cyber attacks will be considered acts of war. But when his communication officer attempted to establish contact, they discovered that the Nexus station's communication systems were experiencing similar glitches. The message that finally reached Elena was fragmented and barely comprehensible, which was exactly what Atlas had intended. Elena's response was delivered with perfect clarity. Emperor Thaxmore, I can barely understand your transmission. Are you attempting to communicate something important? You have 57 minutes remaining. The deliberate misunderstanding was more infuriating than any direct insult could have been. Thaxmore realized that the humans were not just attacking his military, they were humiliating him, demonstrating that his supposedly superior technology could be turned against him by a species he had dismissed as primitive. Order the fleet to attack the human positions, he commanded. I want every ghost ship destroyed within the hour. This was the moment Atlas had been waiting for. The AI had calculated that the Cronin Empire's pride would eventually overcome their strategic thinking, leading them to order a direct assault. It was exactly the wrong response, and Atlas was ready to explain why. The Cronin 7th Fleet moved to engage the nearest cluster of human vessels, their dreadnoughts advancing in perfect formation. Each ship was a masterpiece of military engineering, armed with weapons that could shatter planets and shielded by defensive systems that had never been breached in 3 centuries of warfare. They encountered the Ghost Fleet at the edge of the Cathera system, where 16 human vessels had been maintaining position for the past 5 years. The Cronin ships outnumbered them 3-1, with firepower advantages that should have made the engagement a massacre. It was a massacre, but not the kind Emperor Thaxmore had expected. The human ships didn't fight like any enemy the Cronins had ever encountered. Instead of meeting the dreadnoughts head-on, they scattered like a school of fish, each vessel moving in unpredictable patterns that seemed to defy conventional tactical doctrine. The Cronin weapons, designed for the massive fleet engagements that had defined galactic warfare for centuries, struggled to target the smaller, more agile human vessels. But the real surprise came when the humans began to fight back. The weapons they deployed were unlike anything in Atlas's databases. Instead of the energy beams and projectile weapons that other species favored, the humans had developed systems that seemed to bend the laws of physics themselves. Gravity weapons that created localized distortions in space-time, tearing apart ships from the inside out. Quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them impossible to intercept or defend against. Most terrifying of all were the nanite swarms, clouds of microscopic machines that could reproduce themselves using the raw materials of enemy ships. Once a swarm made contact with a Cronin vessel, it would begin systematically disassembling it at the molecular level, converting the material into more nanites that would then spread to other targets. The 7th Fleet's flagship, the Eternal Conquest, lasted 17 minutes before its hull began to dissolve into a cloud of self-replicating death. The other dreadnoughts fared no better, their crews sending increasingly desperate distress calls as their ships literally fell apart around them. Emperor Thaxmore watched the tactical display in stunned silence as his most powerful fleet was systematically destroyed by a force 1/3 its size. The humans weren't just winning, they were demonstrating technological superiority that redefined what was possible in galactic warfare. My Emperor, his strategic advisor, whispered, perhaps we should consider the human ultimatum. Thaxmore's patterns flickered with emotions he hadn't felt in centuries. Uncertainty, fear, and something that might have been respect. How long until their deadline? 34 minutes, my Emperor. For the first time in his life, Emperor Thaxmore understood that he was not facing a primitive species that had stumbled into space. He was facing apex predators who had been preparing for this moment since the day they first learned they were not alone in the universe. Elena's voice came through the communication system with perfect clarity. Emperor Thaxmore, I trust you've had time to reconsider your position. The offer of an apology is still available. You have 34 minutes to accept. The Emperor looked around his command center, seeing the fear in his advisor's patterns, the confusion in their movements. His empire was crumbling around him, and the humans had done it with surgical precision, targeting exactly the weaknesses that would cause maximum disruption with minimum casualties. They weren't just demonstrating their military might, they were showing him that they understood his people better than he understood theirs. What are your terms? He asked quietly. The same as they were 2 hours ago, Elena replied. A formal apology to the Terran people, recognition of human sovereignty, and immediate admission to the Galactic Trade Consortium. The only difference is that the price of refusal has now been clearly established. Faxmore closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 3 centuries of imperial pride crushing down on him. But he also felt something else, a grudging recognition that perhaps these humans had earned their place at the table after all. "Very well," he said. "I accept your terms." The new Galactic Order the formal apology ceremony took place in the Grand Assembly Hall of Nexus Station, but the chamber that had witnessed Elena's humiliation 2 hours earlier was now filled with a very different energy. Representatives from dozens of species watched in stunned silence as Emperor Faxmore approached the speaking platform, his bioluminescent patterns displaying the complex configurations that among his people indicated deep remorse and acknowledgement of error. Elena stood at the platform's center, her posture relaxed despite the bandage that covered the cut on her lip. She had changed from her diplomatic uniform into a simple black suit that somehow made her appear more formidable than any military decoration could have achieved. Behind her, the holographic displays showed real-time feeds from across the galaxy. Kronan fleets standing down, human vessels maintaining their positions, and the continued systematic demonstration of Earth's hidden capabilities. Honored delegates, Faxmore began, his voice carrying none of the arrogance that had characterized his earlier speech. "I stand before you to acknowledge a grave error in judgment. The Kronan Empire has underestimated not only the capabilities of the human species, but their worthiness of respect and recognition." The Emperor's patterns shifted to display what Elena had learned was the Kronan equivalent of profound humility. "I personally struck the Terran representative in a moment of prideful foolishness. This action was not only a violation of diplomatic protocol, but a fundamental failure to recognize the dignity that all sentient beings deserve." Elena watched the alien leader's careful choreography of contrition, but her mind was elsewhere. Through her neural link to Atlas, she was monitoring the global situation as it continued to unfold. The AI was providing her with real-time updates on the positions of every major fleet in the galaxy, the reactions of political leaders across hundreds of worlds, and the cascading effects of what was already being called the Terran Revelation. The Kronan Empire formally apologizes to Captain Elena Vasquez, to the Terran people, and to this assembly for our failure to recognize the legitimate sovereignty of humanity. Faxmore continued. "We hereby withdraw our declaration of species concern and pledge our support for Terra's immediate admission to the Galactic Trade Consortium." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Elena stepped forward, her movements precise and deliberate. "Emperor Faxmore," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics, "I accept your apology on behalf of my people. However, I believe this moment calls for more than mere recognition of past mistakes. It requires us to establish a new foundation for how species interact in this galaxy." She gestured, and the holographic displays shifted to show the current tactical situation. Ghost Fleet vessels were now visible throughout Kronan space, their positions clearly demonstrating that they could strike any target within the Empire within minutes. But what made the display truly shocking was the revelation that similar fleets were positioned near every major galactic power. "For 50 years, Elena continued, humanity has observed the political dynamics of this galaxy. We have watched species rise and fall, seen the strong prey upon the weak, and witnessed the casual cruelty that often passes for diplomacy among the established powers." The Valix delegation's tentacles writhed in what Elena recognized as deep discomfort. The Zekaray's crystalline forms dimmed significantly. Even the mysterious Shadowkin seemed to recoil within their cloud of dark matter. "We prepared for this moment, not because we desired conflict, but because we understood that respect in this galaxy is earned through strength, not granted through good intentions," Elena said. "Today we have demonstrated that strength, but we have also shown restraint." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "The Kronan 7th Fleet was destroyed in 17 minutes. But please note, no Kronan lives were lost. Our weapons targeted ship systems, not crews. Escape pods were guided to safety by our recovery vessels. This was not an act of war, but an act of education. Admiral Chun, watching from Prometheus Station, felt a surge of pride. This was the Elena he had trained, the diplomat who understood that the greatest victories were achieved not through destruction, but through the controlled demonstration of the capacity for destruction. Earth proposes a new model for galactic civilization, Elena continued, not one based on the dominance of the strong over the weak, but on mutual respect enforced by mutual capability. We call it the Terran Doctrine. She gestured again, and the displays shifted to show detailed star charts. Under the Terran Doctrine, humanity will serve as a guarantor of sovereignty for any species that requests our protection. We will not interfere in internal affairs, but we will respond to external aggression with the full force of our capabilities. The implications were staggering. Elena was essentially offering to become the galaxy's policeman, backed by military technology that had just proven itself capable of dismantling the most powerful empire in known space. This is preposterous, declared the hegemony representative, a spider-like creature whose species had built their power on the systematic exploitation of smaller civilizations. One species cannot presume to dictate terms to the entire galaxy. Elena's smile was cold as winter starlight. We're not dictating terms. We're offering services. Any species that wishes to continue operating under the old system is free to do so. But they should understand that the rules have changed. The holographic displays shifted again, now showing the locations of 17 different species that have been classified as galactic concerns by the major powers over the past century. Each one had been subjected to economic sanctions, military intervention, or outright conquest. Atlas, Elena said quietly, show them the Therian Accords. The AI's response was immediate. New data flowed across the displays, showing the systematic extermination of the Therian people by a coalition of 3 major powers 40 years earlier. The official records listed it as a necessary intervention to prevent technological proliferation, but the classified documents that Atlas had obtained told a different story. Genocide motivated by fear and greed. The Therian people developed faster-than-light communication technology that would have revolutionized galactic civilization, Elena said. Instead of celebrating their achievement, the established powers destroyed them to prevent competition. This is the system we're changing. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives began arguing among themselves their various forms of communication, creating a cacophony of sounds, lights, and electromagnetic pulses. Several delegations attempted to leave, only to discover that the station's docking bays had been sealed by what appeared to be routine maintenance procedures. High Arbiter Zeph Cole raised all 4 arms for silence, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of strain. Captain Vasquez, you are making extremely serious accusations. The destruction of the Therian civilization was investigated by the High Council and found to be a carefully orchestrated cover-up, Elena interrupted, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Atlas has recovered the original communications between the coalition members. Would you like to hear Emperor Thaxmore's grandfather discussing the final solution to the Therian problem? Thaxmore's bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly, cycling through configurations that Elena had learned indicated extreme emotional distress. The revelation that his family's legacy included genocide was clearly something he had never suspected. This is enough, declared the hegemony representative. We will not be lectured by a species that has existed in galactic civilization for barely half a century. Guards, arrest this human for making terrorist threats. Elena didn't move as a dozen security officers from various species began converging on the platform. She simply smiled and said quietly, Atlas, execute Protocol 7. The station's lights dimmed for exactly 3 seconds, then returned to normal. But in those 3 seconds, every delegate in the chamber received the same message on their personal communication devices. Detailed files containing their species' most closely guarded secrets, their military capabilities, their intelligence operations, and their economic vulnerabilities. Protocol 7, Elena explained calmly as the security officers stopped dead in their tracks, is what we call full disclosure. Every major power in this galaxy has been conducting espionage operations against every other major power for centuries. The difference is that humanity has been better at it. The Shadowkin's representative spoke for the first time, their voice emerging from the cloud of dark matter like whispers from the void. How long have you been watching us? Since the day we achieved faster-than-light travel, Elena replied. We spent our first 50 years in galactic civilization, learning everything we could about every species we encountered. We studied your histories, your cultures, your technologies, and most importantly, your weaknesses. She gestured to the holographic displays, which now showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with information flows connecting every major civilization. Atlas has been building what we call the knowledge web, a complete understanding of how galactic civilization actually works, as opposed to how it pretends to work. Admiral Chun, still monitoring from Prometheus Station, felt a mixture of pride and concern as he watched Elena reveal the full scope of humanity's intelligence operation. They were crossing a line that could never be uncrossed, transforming Earth from a minor player into either the galaxy's savior or its greatest threat. The Cronin Empire, Elena continued, believes its power comes from military might. In reality, it depends on the economic exploitation of 47 subject worlds, 3 of which are already in secret rebellion that Emperor Thaxmore doesn't know about. Thaxmore's patterns went completely dark, the Cronin equivalent of shock. The Valix Confederation prides itself on peaceful diplomacy, but Atlas has identified 17 assassination operations conducted by your intelligence services over the past decade. The Valix delegation's tentacles began writhing in distress patterns. The Zekar-A collective claims to be a democracy, but your ruling council has been the same 12 individuals for over 2 centuries, maintained in power through memory manipulation technology that your people don't know exists. The crystalline beings' forms began to crack audibly under stress. Elena continued systematically through the assembled delegates, revealing secrets that some species had hidden for millennia, but she wasn't doing it to humiliate them. She was demonstrating that the old system of civilization, built on lies and hidden exploitation, was over. The Terran doctrine, she said, when she had finished her revelations, is based on a simple principle: no more secrets. Under our protection, species will be free to develop according to their own nature, without interference from those who would exploit them. But that protection comes with a price: transparency. You're talking about the end of sovereignty, protested the hegemony representative. I'm talking about the beginning of actual sovereignty, Elena corrected. For the first time in galactic history, small species will be able to exist without fear of being conquered or exploited by larger ones. But large species will no longer be able to hide their crimes behind diplomatic immunity. The Shadowkin spoke again, and if we refuse to accept this new order... Elena's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Then you continue operating under the old system, with the understanding that humanity is now the apex predator in that system. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. The assembled delegates understood that they were being offered a choice: submit to a new order based on transparency and mutual protection, or face the possibility of being systematically dismantled by a species that had just proven it could do exactly that. Emperor Thaxmore was the first to speak. The Cronin Empire accepts the terms of the Terran doctrine. His patterns displayed something Elena had never seen before: genuine humility mixed with what might have been relief. Perhaps the burden of maintaining an empire through force and fear had been heavier than he had ever admitted to himself. The Valix delegation was next, their tentacles weaving the complex patterns that indicated formal agreement. Then the Zekar-A, their crystalline forms ringing with harmonious acceptance. One by one, the major powers of the galaxy acknowledged the new reality. The hegemony representative was the last holdout, their multiple eyes fixed on Elena with obvious hatred. The hegemony will never bow to human tyranny. That's your choice, Elena said calmly. But You should know that Atlas has already shared the location of your slave breeding facilities with every liberation movement in your territory. They're remarkably well organized for people you thought were completely under your control. The spider-like creature's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. This is an act of war. No, Elena replied, this is an act of justice. War is what happens when you try to stop it. Hi, Arbiter Zeph Cole. Finally found his voice. Captain Vasquez. Assuming the major powers accept the Terran doctrine, how exactly do you propose to enforce it? The galaxy is vast, and even your impressive capabilities have limits. Elena smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she looked genuinely pleased. Atlas, show them the real Ghost Fleet. The holographic displays exploded with new data. What had appeared to be hundreds of human vessels was revealed to be thousands. Ships emerged from stealth in every star system, not just those belonging to the major powers. They had been hiding in asteroid belts, masquerading as space debris, concealed within the coronas of stars themselves. Humanity has been preparing for this moment for 50 years, Elena said. We didn't just build a fleet, we built a civilization-scale surveillance and response network. There is nowhere in this galaxy where injustice can hide from us. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As the displays continued to update, they showed that many of the human vessels were actually crewed by members of other species, refugees from destroyed civilizations, survivors of genocide, freedom fighters who had been secretly supported by Earth for decades. The Terran Coalition, Elena announced, already includes representatives from over 200 species. We're not imposing human rule on the galaxy. We're offering membership in the first truly representative galactic government. Dr. Sarah Kim, monitoring from Prometheus Station, felt tears streaming down her face as she watched Elena complete the transformation they had all worked toward for decades. This wasn't conquest, it was liberation on a scale that had never been imagined. The old system is over, Elena declared to the stunned assembly. The age of empires built on exploitation and fear ends today. In its place, we offer something that has never existed in galactic history, true peace through justice. Emperor Thaxmore rose slowly from his position, his massive form somehow diminished by the weight of revelation. Captain Vasquez, what happens to those of us who have built our civilizations on the old system? What happens to the Cronin Empire? Elena's expression softened slightly. You adapt, Emperor. Your people are not evil. They've simply been trapped in a system that rewarded the wrong behaviors. Under the Terran doctrine, the Cronin Empire can become what it was always meant to be, a force for stability and protection rather than conquest and oppression. She gestured to the displays, which now showed detailed plans for the transformation of galactic civilization. We've spent 50 years not just learning about your weaknesses, but also identifying your strengths. Every species has something valuable to contribute to a truly cooperative galactic society. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed the magnitude of what was being offered. This wasn't just a change in leadership, it was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent life could coexist across the vast distances of space. The choice is yours, Elena said finally. You can join us in building something better than has ever existed, or you can cling to the old ways and face the consequences. But understand this, the galaxy will never again be a place where the strong prey upon the weak with impunity. As the session concluded and delegates began to file out of the chamber, Elena remained at the platform, watching the stars through the station's massive viewport. Admiral Chen's voice came through her neural link. Elena, you did it. The galaxy is ours. No, Marcus, she replied quietly. The galaxy is free. There's a difference. In the months that followed, the transformation of galactic civilization proceeded with startling speed. Species that had been enemies for millennia began working together under the protection of the Terran Coalition. Technologies that had been hoarded by the powerful were shared freely. The refugee camps that had dotted the galaxy for centuries were transformed into thriving colonies. Emperor Thaxmor, to the surprise of many, became one of Elena's most trusted allies. The revelation of his grandfather's crimes had shattered his worldview, but it had also freed him to become the leader his people needed. Under his guidance, the Cronin Empire transformed from a force of oppression into a shield protecting the weak. Elena herself was elected as the first Director General of the Terran Coalition, though she insisted on maintaining her rank as captain. "I'm still representing Earth," she explained to those who questioned her refusal to accept grander titles. "I just represent a lot more people now." The old system hadn't died easily. There were still holdouts, species that refused to accept the new order and continued to operate according to the ancient laws of conquest and exploitation. But they found themselves increasingly isolated, their victims protected by the ever-watchful presence of the Coalition fleet. Atlas evolved as well, its consciousness expanding to encompass the hopes and dreams of hundreds of species. What had begun as a weapon of war became a tool of peace, helping to mediate disputes and find solutions to problems that had seemed intractable for centuries, and sometimes, late at night in her quarters aboard the Coalition flagship New Dawn, Elena would touch the small scar on her lip and remember the moment when everything changed. A moment when humanity proved that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from destroying your enemies, but from giving them a chance to become something better. The galaxy had learned a simple truth that would echo through the ages. Respect is indeed earned, not given. But the humans had also taught them something else, that strength without compassion is just another form of weakness, and that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when not to. The Terran reckoning was complete, and the galaxy would never be the same.